For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss the place of the popular and the populist. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
You are saying that it is common in political commentary that locally and internationally to treat the popular and the populist as one. But why do you say that it's important that they be distinguished?
Well, the word populist is used really as a sort of swear word when you want to dismiss something as being stupid or inadequate or problematic. You say it's populist. But there is in fact something called populism, which one associates with Donald Trump, with Duterte of Philippines, a number of other people. Some people associate with the EFF, and some people associate, like me also, with the ANC as well. And in the 1980s, some people used to say the UDF is populist. But my understanding is that populist refers to people using slogans that refer to matters that concern people, land and all of this. So they take something that really matters to people, but it is not as part of a program for realization of certain goals. So it's more of a slogan, it's more of rhetoric, it is not a program. Now the popular for me is something different. We would refer to popular power, and we would refer to realization of popular goals, and that meant you planned and you took certain steps to realize it. So I think they're very important to distinguish, and the popular is not, in my view, a dangerous phenomenon. Now, populism can be dangerous, and it seems to converge with fascism in certain cases in the world today.
You've also given us an example of the EFF during Jacob Zuma's tenure. Do you think they were successful in making sure that important issues like the issues of him bringing back the money, as well as like maybe making sure that everyone was aware of the corruption that was happening amongst the ANC government?
Well, my example of the EFF in that time was to say that they were not being populist. They were actually taking steps which were fairly methodical to try to highlight the pillaging of money from the state. And it was very important in highlighting it. Everyone knows the slogan, pay back the money, and everyone associates it with the corruption and state capture of the Zuma period. So what the EFF was doing then was not populist, in my view. I think it was popular in that they responded to the anger that very many people had about the diversion of funds meant for the poor to enrich people. So I think that was successful, but it was also not populist, it was popular.
Yeah. You're also addressing the issue of the tensions between the Indians and African back then in KZN, and you also tell us about the two men that intervened to make sure that the violence was kept, which were Albert Luthuli and Dr. Monty Naika. Can you briefly tell us about those incidents?
They're not just two men. They're two very famous men in the history of the liberation struggle in South Africa. In 1949, there was widespread violence between Africans and Indians, and this related to ongoing tension between the two communities, resentment of Indians who were seen as being rich and exploiting Africans. And people don't always recognize that a lot of Indians are very, very poor. But the main thing then, and also, by the way, the conflict was spurred on by some interventions of the state at the time. They were happy about these fights. Now, Luthuli and Nika were very responsible leaders. They didn't try to capitalize on this tension for one or other purpose. Indian community could have gone in on itself and resented African majority and things like that. Africans could have said, like Malema does, that Indians exploit people and do this, that, and the other. And they didn't do that. What they did is they tried to rebuild the trust between the two communities, and they took steps to go together to both communities. And Luthuli remained very close to the Indian community. One of his daughters, she's now 90-something, Albertina, told me she used to hang around at various meetings because she knew that the food was very good. With
I
the
also love their
Indian
food.
Congress, the food was very good. So the children used to hang around at these meetings because they knew that afterwards they would have a very good meal. Yeah.
So now, Raymond, if we look at the politicians of our time, do you think they can use these words and to their advantage, especially as we are approaching the elections?
You mean use the approach?
The approaches.
Well, you know, they can, in theory. But I don't think, if you look at it, I don't know if the ANC has intervened and advanced a vision of good community relations between Africans and Indians. So you have this thing of the EFF making these anti-Indian remarks. Some people attack it, individuals attack it, but I don't think that the notion of building a united South Africa has been properly analyzed, because it's not just a question of solidarity and sensitivity, it's also a question of what is the relationship between the majority and minorities. Are the rights of minorities something bad that we shouldn't have, or should we respect the cultures, religions, all these things of all the people of the country? And you don't have coherent discussion of this by politicians. So whether they have the inclination to learn about it, if they do, or use it if they do know about it, doesn't seem to be evident.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crema Media's Polity about the place of the popular and the populist.